Hello everyone, it's Karina with Karina Loves to Plan. Thank you for joining me in my little corner of the internet where we talk all things planners, fountain pens, and fountain pen inks. I'm finally reviewing my July currently inked and going through my thoughts on each of these pen and ink pairings. I'll show you my Zentangles and paper swatches as well as the roses I've painted. Let's get started. Now, just as a note, I did take all of my pens and inks to England and to Scotland as well for vacation, and no leakage or anything like that. All of them held up pretty well. So the first pen that I had inked up is my Esterbrook SD in Honeycomb. This has a needlepoint nib, and I have it inked with Sailor Ink Studio 573. This was a fun combination. The ink had no flow issues, and this needlepoint nib is smooth and crisp. I gave the ink a 9, the flow a 9, and the comfort level of the SD a 10. And then here's a look at Sailor Ink Studio 573 on all of the different papers. So if you're not familiar with this, I swatch in my Hemlock and Oak notebook with 70 GSM archivist paper, and I also swatch on 7 other different papers as well. So you'll be able to see archivist, Tomoe River paper, Rhodia, Midori, Iroful, Onion Skin, Yamamoto Bank, and Bank. These 3 papers I purchased from the San Francisco Pen Show, and then the rest are, I guess, readily available on Amazon. So look at the, oh my gosh, I cannot speak. This is me after work. Looking at the different paper swatches, I'm always interested to see Yamamoto Bank and Bank. They almost bring the green out in every ink that has a little bit of green in it, or a lot of the yellow is coming out there as well. It looks a little duller on the Midori paper and almost lighter on the Tomoe River, but leaning more towards, I think, like a terracotta color on the Iroful. Really interesting. And then with every pen and ink pairing, I also do a Zentangle. This pattern is from Varni Kekarni. Go ahead and follow them on Instagram because I get the majority of my patterns from them. I've also linked their Instagram account in the description below. It's just such a fun way to be able to use your pens and inks other than just writing with them. And then along with that, I also paint in my Me Plus planner, and there is the painting of the roses. It's always so cool to see just the effect that water and that water is going to have on the ink. So you can definitely see a little bit more of the shading that's happening here. So that is my, where's my pen now? My Esterbrook SD with Sailor Ink Studio 573. Next, we have one of my newest pens. This is from Stilo A Stile, and this was a collaboration they did with Leonardo. This is in the Radici colorway, and just look at that. It's the tortoise colorway, but then you've got the gold in there as well, and this is inked with Robert Oster Cafe Crema. This extra fine nib is juicy and smooth, and the shading of this brown was sublime. I have no complaints. I gave the ink a 9, the flow a 10 because it's just extra juicy, and the comfort level of the Leonardo Momento Zero a 9. There's Robert Oster Cafe Crema on the different papers, and it looks generally consistent across all of them. There aren't any major chromo shading differences between the papers here. And then when we look at the Zentangle pattern, this one is just mesmerizing. I did like make a little mistake there, but what I love about Zentangles is that you start off with like that grid there in the corner, and then when you put them all together, it just makes for a really cool overall big picture, and I love that. And then I'll quickly show you the painting that I did in my Me Plus planner. The roses, the shading actually is really great in here, but I feel like it looks more orange on this paper than it does on the other papers that I've used it on. So that is my Leonardo and Stilo A Stile Radici with Robert Oster Cafe Crema. Now we have my Hines Pen Model K Champagne at Midnight, and this has an extra fine nib. It's like a really juicy extra fine nib, and it's inked with Sailor Ink Studio 280. This is one of my favorite pairings. This extra fine nib is smooth and juicy, and the ink has such stunning chromo shading. I gave the ink a 10, the flow a 10, and the comfort level of the Model K a 10. Now, Sailor Ink Studio 280 is an ink that I've used this year, so I didn't necessarily need to do the paper swatches again, but I always find it fun. I almost want to go back and find where I used this ink previously because, no, not that one. Because it just shows me that, like, if I can use an ink more than once in a year, that's a success for me, that I'm actually using my stash. Oh no, that's Sakura Blizzard. Very similar though. I know I've used it at least once earlier this year, and I can't remember off the top of my head when it was. But anyway, that is what the ink looks like on all the different papers, and very true that Yamamoto Bank and Bank really pull out the green in these inks, whereas it looks more pinky brown on Aerofil, a lot more pink coming out on the Archivist, and a little bit on the Tomoe River paper. I love Sailor inks because they surprise me every time I do these paper swatches. And then let's look at the Zentangle. This one was one that I actually showed at my class at the Pacific Northwest Pen Show. It's a really easy, it's one of the, I say, basic doodles that I do that just looks so intricate. And I love the pattern because depending on which way you do the pattern next to it creates a different overall finish. So it's a fun one for sure. And then let's look at the way that it looks on the Me Plus planner paper. Looks a little bit more like olivey yellow, brown, green here, and then a bit more pinky brown in the chromo shading. So fun to do. So that is my Hines Pen Model K in Champagne at Midnight with Sailor Ink Studio 280. The next pen and ink pairing is my Hogtown Pens Swansea Large in the Conway Stewart Opal, and this has an extra fine nib, and it is inked with Wearingeul Purgatorio. I love that this pink ink is actually an accent color in the resin. It's got great flow, it's very legible for a light pink, and I had no hard starts with this. I gave the ink a 9, the flow a 10, and the comfort level of the Swansea Large a 9. It wasn't necessarily something I meant to do, but I mean, you could definitely see parts of this resin really matching with that Purgatorio. I don't think I had originally intended for that, but now that I look at it, it is a perfect match. So then let's bring out the paper swatches here. So looking at the ink on the different papers, I don't see too much of a difference between the different papers, which I don't know if I was expecting that or not. There's a little bit of yellow or orange coming out on the Tomoe River paper, but generally consistent across all of them. And then the Zentangle is another pattern from Varney Kekarney. I actually really like this one. This one was a fun one, but also one of the things that I love about Zentangles is that you really have to let go of perfection, you know, and you focus on just the grid that you're working on, and then it just turns into this one big, beautiful picture. And then when we look at the roses that I've painted, the ink looks really, really light when I do that, but it's such legible ink. I have no issues with this. I know some people find this really light, but this is an ink that I really love. So that is Wearingeul Purgatorio in my Hogtown Pens Swansea Large, which is in the Conway Stewart Opal. I now have my Pelikan M800 in the brown black. This has an extra fine cursive smooth italic nib, and it is inked with Sailor Urameku Kitsune Biori. This was such a fun pairing, and I wish I could have used this more. I love the shading and the flow of this ink, and I had no issues. I gave the ink a 10, the flow a 10, and the comfort level of the M800 a 9. So there we have Kitsune Biori on the different paper swatches, and this is why I love Sailor inks so much, is because of how different it looks on the papers. This is really about science and chemical reactions, and you see how much more brown and almost pink it looks on the Archivist, and a little bit more gray on the Tomoe River paper. There's a lot more coral coming out on the onion skin, but this looks almost like really gray on the Aerofil, and a little bit more mauve-y on the two different bank papers. It's such an interesting ink. And then the Zentangle, from another pattern from Varney Kekarney. I like this one because I really was using the cursive smooth italic, the different edges of the pen to create, I don't know if you can see that, but using the extra fine cursive smooth italic to be able to create the different line widths in the pattern there. So fun. It's one of my favorites. It's such a, what do I call it, slicey but smooth nib. And then when we look at the rose, Oh, Sailor Kitsune Biore is one I've used before this year, not Ink Studio 280, but I have used this before and I did not mind doing the paper swatches and the rows again, just because it's so fun to be able to use your pens and inks. And if you're able to use them more than once in a year, that is a win. I think nowadays we have so many new inks, and some of the inks that I have in my collection I only use once a year, if at all. So to be able to use an ink more than once in a year means I'm using my stuff. So, all right, so that is my, oh, where did I put my pen here? My Pelikan M800 with Sailor Shikiori Kitsune Biore, one of my favorite inks. Now, last on this page here, we have my Mayfair Pens Nolor model in Valinor, and I love this one just because of the colors in that resin, and it's inked with the very bright Pen BBS number 288. This pink is punchy and loud, not one I usually go for, and one I probably won't keep, but I didn't have any issues with flow. I gave the ink an 8, the flow a 9, and the comfort level of the Nolor an 8. And there's the pink on all the different papers, and it kind of bled through a little bit to the Zentangle on the other side, but it almost looks a little flat on the Aerofil, if I can say that. And then the shimmer does look pretty consistent throughout. And to me, I hate saying this because I know there are some people that love this ink, but for me, it's just kind of like meh, not one that I would probably keep in my collection. I feel like I'm moving away from shimmer inks and going towards more of the chromo shading. Really funny how that's becoming my favorite, because I do love shimmer inks, but I feel like I'm moving away from them. And then you have another Zentangle here. This is not from Varney Kakarni. This is, I can't remember where I found this, but it's a really easy one to start with as well. It's essentially going from one corner, doing a curve and curve and curve and curve, and then working your way in until you get to the middle. But then when you put that all together, you have no idea how it started. This is one of the reasons why I love Zentangles, is because you start with one grid and then work your way through, and then you get this picture and you're like, how did that even happen? So, and it's such a relaxing practice for me. So I highly recommend starting even just doodling. What a great way to be able to use your pens and inks. And then I painted this on the Me Plus planner paper. I don't know why I'm saying that this is boring. I know it's a shimmery pink ink and some love this, but for me personally, it's what I'm moving away from. It's not the style that I go for anymore, but it's pretty, but just not for me. So then that is my Mayfair Nolor with Pen BBS number 288. The next pen I used is my Pilot Custom 74 in Forest Green. This has a 14 karat fine nib, and I have it inked with Pelikan Edelstein Olivine. This was also the ink that I used in my Hobonichi A6 5-year journal, and I just love it. Love it. Spoiler alert. This was an amazing writing experience. This nib is so smooth, juicy, and this green is just sublime. No issues. I gave the ink a 9, the flow a 9, and the comfort level of the Pilot Custom 74 a 9. So there are all the paper swatches with Pelikan Edelstein Olivine, and I'm not seeing, oh well, okay, I'm seeing a little bit of a difference on the Aerofil. It looks like it's more teal on this paper and then a little bit lighter on the onion skin. That's the main difference, but the rest of them seem generally consistent. And then when we look at this Zentangle, another one from Varney Kakarni, I really love this one, especially with the 14 karat fine nib on the Pilot. Just a wonderful experience. Now, I gave the comfort level of the Custom 74 a 9 just because it's slightly narrower than I normally like to go, but it was still just such a fun writing experience. And can we just nail pen? Yeah, lovely. So then we also painted the roses, and lovely. I am totally in my green era, and I'm just loving the greens, as you can see with my nails and my pen, totally in the green era right now. So that is my Pilot Custom 74 in Forest Green with Pelikan Edelstein Olivine. Now we have my Platinum 3776 in the Fuji Onke. This has a 14 karat extra fine nib, and it is inked with Sailor 50 States Alabama. And I'm just thinking of Forrest Gump, where they're both saying, Alabama, sir. Sorry, awful, awful impression. I love this extra fine nib. It's so crisp, but still has great flow with this ink. It's a brighter green, great for summer, but it's one I won't be buying a bottle of. I gave the ink a 9, the flow a 9, and the comfort level of the 3776 a 9. And here are the swatches on the paper here. The one that I think looks most different to me is the onion skin swatch, and then the rest have a little bit more of a brighter teal happening there. I mean, the Midori is going to make it look a little bit more yellow due to the cream paper, but the rest look generally the same. And then when we look at this Zentangle, I love this one because there are a couple of squares where not totally, but I did screw it up, and you can't really tell unless I point out those specific squares to you, and I can see those two. Can you point out to me which ones are the ones that I screwed up on? Yeah? I'll let you know now. It's these two because I didn't put the initial border around it. But if I hadn't shown you, you probably wouldn't have been able to tell. But it's still such a fun one. I love the lines of this. And then when we look at the rose, this is really a fun, bright green, great for summer, but it's probably not one that I will buy a bottle of. So then we have my Platinum Fuji Onke with Sailor 50 States, Alabama. The next pen and ink combo is my Wancher Frozen Sake. This has an 18 karat fine nib, and it is inked with Vinta Peria. While I love this ink in a swatch, it was just a tad too light when doodling or journaling. So I gave the ink an 8, the flow a 9, and the comfort level of the Wancher Pro Gear size an 8. Like I said, I love the ink on the different papers, swatching with it, because you can really see the complexities with the chromo shading. Really on the Archivist paper, a lot of that pink is coming out here. But then when you look at the Zentangle, it just feels really light, and probably it could be just the Archivist paper, but it just felt like it was almost too light for me to really enjoy it. And then when we look at the rose even feels a little light on this Me Plus planner paper. It's only when I really had it in the saturated areas that the shading is coming out, but then even here it just felt a little too light. So that is my Wancher Frozen Sake with Vinta Peria. Now we have my Pilot Kaküno in Azure Sky. This has a steel fine nib, and it is inked with Sailor Ink Studio 224. I loved this pairing. It's not an exact match, but it's still beautiful, and the shading still shows even with a fine nib. So I gave the ink a 10 because it's just stunning, the flow a 9, and the comfort level of the Kaküno an 8. Can we just look at how Sailor Ink Studio 224 performs on all of these papers? You definitely see purple and green along these. But then with Yamamoto Bank and Bank, that green just is what's dominant in those swatches. Such a pretty color. And funny enough, when I actually write with this, I feel like it's more of the purple that comes out rather than just the green, but still stunning. And then you have the Zentangle there. Not as much shading as I thought would show up here, but it still actually had really great shading, even with this fine nib. Now let me show you the rose that I painted with it here, and it just looks so beautiful on this Me Plus planner paper. You can still see the greens and the dusty purple here. So gorgeous. So that is my Pilot Kaküno in Azure Sky with Sailor Ink Studio 224. And now we have my Leonardo Momento Magico in Amethyst. This has an extra fine elastic or flex nib, and it is inked with Diamine Lady Gray. I had no issues with flow. This ink did not feel dry, and I loved this pairing. I gave the ink a 9 because it's beautiful, the flow a 10, and the comfort level of the Momento Magico a 10. I love the way this looks on all of the different papers. It's purple and then different shades of purple, a little bit of blue, a little bit of gray. Lovely. I didn't really have any issues with it being too dry. I know a few people have said that they've had issues with it being dry, but I think because this pen has the elastic extra fine, it's a bouncier, wetter nib, which really helped with this. And then when we look at the Zentangle, gorgeous. You can really see where the shading is pooling in certain areas, and I love how that looks. Just so fun. And then let's look at the shading with the painting of the rose. You can see the chromo shading that's happening here, and you got more, I guess, burgundy purple there, the dusty purple, and a little bit of blue too. So fun. So that is my Leonardo Momento Magico in Amethyst with Diamine Lady Gray. And last but not least, we have my Just Turnings. This is in the pastel primary manipulation, and this has an extra fine architect nib, and I have it inked with Diamine Forever Smoky Mauve. This had a great flow, not a ton of shading, but I really do love this dusty purple. I gave the ink a 9, the flow a 9, and the comfort level of the pastel primary manipulation a 9. There's the ink on the different papers. I feel like because of the way that I was cutting these papers out, maybe some of the oils from my hands kind of affected some of these, but I really love the smoky grayish purple of the smoky mauve. It's such a fun dusty purple, but not a lot of chromo shading happening with the permanent or the forever ink. And then when we look at the Zentangle, what I love about this is that I definitely use the line variation or the nib variation in the architect nib. So when the lines going across, they were broader, and then the lines going down were narrower. And it was just fun to have a nib to have the line variations really show. And then when we have the rose, again, there's a little bit more pink actually showing out in the more saturated areas, but it's just a gorgeous ink, and I'm so glad that I have a big bottle of that. So that is my Just Turnings pastel primary manipulation with Diamine Smoky Mauve. So there are my thoughts on all of the inks and pens that I used for the month of July. And I honestly wish I could have used some of these more. I think being on vacation, I wasn't taking work notes or anything like that. Or maybe I'm just getting to the point where maybe 12 pens is too much for me on a month-to-month basis. And maybe I should decrease down to 10 a month, but we'll see. Because a lot of these pens still have ink in them. But I'm going to, for some of these, I'm going to dump the ink out. There's like less than, half a mil in a lot of these, so it's not a ton of ink that I'll be wasting, but I'm not going to force myself to use a pen and ink combination once I already have new ones inked up, and I already do have them inked for August, so watch out for that video coming soon. But which one did you think was going to be my favorite? Was it one that I actually did say was my favorite? Let me know your thoughts below. All right, but that is it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any questions, leave them down below, and don't forget to hit that like button and to subscribe. Thanks again, and have yourselves a great day.